People throughout history have brought about innovations, made revolutionary breakthroughs, and ultimately defined their eras. Most of these didn't go without their critics, and Elon Musk is no exception. Some see him almost as a god amongst men, whereas others see him as the worst human being in recent history. But blanket statements like that don't give you any insight into what is a real case study for the position of power and influence that an individual is able to achieve in the world today, and the bigger existential questions that come as a result of that. On the one hand, a real-life superhero solving humanity's biggest problems, and on the other, a union-busting, deceitful maniac who's a danger not just for democracy, but for the future of mankind itself. Is he a force for good? Does this all end in disaster? Or are these even the right questions to be asking? Elon Musk is undoubtedly a genius, heroic to some and evil to others. He is often misunderstood, a product of his upbringing, and clearly a man on a mission to change the face of humanity. But how did we get here? Musk may feel like he's been around for a while, but that's only because he's been in the limelight since he was young. He was born in South Africa in 1971 and grew up there in the administrative capital of Pretoria. As a kid, it was already clear he was very smart, but that didn't necessarily translate well to academics. It's said that he would only do well in the things that interested him, where he'd be able to laser focus on specific subjects, but had absolutely no interest in those that he wasn't fond of. He was a scrawny kid on the autism spectrum, with no social skills and no friends around him. He was beaten up often by his peers, even having ended up in hospital as a result of a particularly bad beating, and his relationship with his father was never great, which continues to be the case to this day. By the time he was in his teens, he developed a video game that he had created from scratch on his own after teaching himself to code, and throughout that time, he was always treated as a genius by his mother. Aside from clearly being intelligent from a young age, the other key point to note about his childhood was the trauma he faced and the constant drama that was always around him in his life. From his parents' divorce, his father's temperament which bordered on bipolarity, and never really being able to associate himself with his peers. Elon moved to Canada after finishing his schooling and enlisted in Queen's University before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania to earn 2 degrees in physics and economics. In 1995, at 24 years old, he founded a company called Zip2 alongside his brother as his first proper venture in entrepreneurship. They raised some money from their dad and developed an internet city guide with maps, directions, and yellow pages with the goal of marketing it to newspapers. The company eventually sold for $307 million, where Elon received $22 million for his 7% stake. By 1999, he used the money that he had made from Zip2 to co-found a company called X.com, which at the time was an online financial services and email payment company. In 2000, X.com merged with their biggest competitors, Confinity, and with that, the now famous PayPal mafia was established. When people speak about Elon Musk now, it's PayPal where they tend to say that he had his first proper breakthrough. It was the one that really got his name out there, but he was also working alongside other beasts in their field in the early internet era. Members of the initial team went on to found other companies including YouTube, LinkedIn, and Yelp, among many others. But the one who probably went on to become the biggest name after Elon Musk was Peter Thiel. Thiel is the author of the book 0 to 1. He owns a fund that invested early in some of the biggest companies today, and he was the CEO of Confinity when it merged with X.com. When the merger first took place, Elon Musk was the original CEO. It was only when the company started suffering from technical issues and Musk was said to have shown himself to be reckless that the board decided to do something about it. When Musk was on his 2-week honeymoon, they launched a coup from within the company and instated Thiel as the CEO. This was another of the traumas that added to the ones that he faced earlier in life, where his capabilities as a leader were put into question. In the long run though, it seemed to work out for the better, as in February 2002, PayPal had its IPO, and in October of that same year, they were acquired by eBay for $1.5 billion. Musk, the largest individual shareholder with about a 12% stake, received over $175 million, which set him up to build the companies that he's best known for today. There's a famous quote of his that goes, "You get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of problems you solve." Now, one of the richest people in the world, the first of the problems he chose was to reduce space transportation costs with the ultimate goal of building a civilization on Mars. And even before PayPal had been sold, he had launched SpaceX and named himself CEO and the first chief engineer. He went on to pour over $100 million of his own money into making rockets with the initial goal of achieving orbit. 2 failed launch attempts later, and with the prospect of bankruptcy looming, they achieved their first successful launch. The company went on to secure a contract worth over $1 billion with NASA, and since then it's grown into the giant player in the aerospace field that it is today. In the time before the first successful launch, he also got into the business of electric cars. Today, at least until he bought Twitter, he was best known as the CEO of Tesla Motors. But in reality, he wasn't the one who founded the company. The story of how Tesla came to be is another interesting one in and of itself, involving betrayals, bankruptcy, and a large payout for the original founders to stay quiet. We'll have to leave that story for another day. But if you're enjoying this one so far, don't forget to leave this video a like. And if you enjoy the topics of people, the world, life lessons, and geopolitics, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with all the videos coming your way. Tesla's impact on the world hasn't just been about the cars they've produced or the evolution that they've brought about for electric-powered vehicles as a whole. Their impact has been almost larger in a cultural sense. It was Tesla's success with the EV and their slick look that made it more of a viable option for consumers who have been driving petrol cars for almost a century. Their success with the technology also opened the doors for other legacy car brands to start venturing more into the space. And it's only since Tesla's rise that we've seen the boom in both hybrid and electric cars in recent years. Elon decided to take a more relaxed approach with patents, and even though that didn't mean anyone could just go and copy them, it made it so that others could benefit from the technology more than would have otherwise been the case, and it definitely wasn't in his best interest financially to do that. During that time, continuing to act on his thesis of solving the world's biggest problems, Musk got himself involved with all kinds of companies with missions that would revolutionize the way that the world works. His latest biographer, Walter Isaacson, has said that Musk has 3 missions that drive him: getting humanity to Mars, having sustainable energy on this planet, and making robots safe. Isaacson says that he keeps repeating this to himself, and if you look at the projects he's involved in aside from SpaceX and Tesla, they're all aligned with this. Solar City, one of his early investments after PayPal, was a company that was originally run by his cousins. In 2016, he bought the company outright and incorporated it into Tesla Energy, which is the energy division of Tesla that provides sustainable energy to cars and homes. The Boring Company is another one of his ventures that builds infrastructure, tunnels, and equipment, as well as inexplicably building a flamethrower called Not a Flamethrower. The companies up to this point seem to be tackling the first 2 of the key missions of getting humanity to Mars and providing sustainable energy. But it's the ones associated with that third point of making robots safe that deserve the most scrutiny. He founded Neuralink in 2016 with a small group of scientists. The goal there is to create implant chips that can go into people's brains to enhance bodily functions. The first human trial took place in January of 2024, and the goal, at least at first, seems to be to help people with physical disabilities to get better. The long-term implications of what that could mean is a whole other case, and we'll go back to it down the line. Musk was also one of the original board members of OpenAI, the owners of ChatGPT, as well as its largest early donor when they first put it together. He's been involved in AI and machine learning since it was really out there in the public consciousness, and again, this is something that we'll circle back to later. Elon Musk was always big on going all in. From the work ethic he's always had, to the scale of the problems he's chosen to solve, to the biggest risks he's taken that have made him one of the richest men in the world. From the moment SpaceX had its first successful launch in 2008 up until recently, it seemed like everything he touched was turning to gold. In 2008, the producers at Marvel and even Robert Downey Jr. were insistent on having Tesla cars in Iron Man's garage as a nod to what Musk was doing. And in 2010, he even featured for a cameo in Iron Man 2, as he was the closest thing they saw to a real-life Tony Stark. SpaceX continued to grow into the biggest ever private aerospace company, and the demand for Tesla cars has been so great that the company has had to run on pre-orders for its cars because they couldn't match production to demand for pretty much its whole existence. The Boring Company was said to be revolutionizing transportation. Starlink through SpaceX was sending satellites into space at the fastest rates in history, and it seemed like nothing could stop him. Walter Isaacson, his biographer that we mentioned earlier, even claimed that he has a superhero complex, and up until recently, you can see how he justified it in his mind. Throughout this time, Musk was also developing what can almost be described as a cult-like following on Twitter. He would get involved in internet banter, the growing crypto community, make announcements about his companies, and generally be a large advocate for free speech at a time where it was becoming a disputed topic, while the role of social media in determining the result of US presidential elections in both 2016 and 2020 were coming under the limelight. In January of 2022, Musk started buying up shares at Twitter, and by mid-March, he owned 9.2% of the company. In mid-April, he made his public offer to buy Twitter outright, saying that it should be a platform for free speech around the world, highlighting its importance for a functioning democracy. After a long, drawn-out battle, in October of 2022, he finally completed the takeover. While in the process, he was reportedly touring Twitter headquarters, and people were telling him about how they valued psychological safety in their employees. His first response was to say no, and their new first principle way of thinking was now urgent intensity, and psychological safety had become the enemy overnight. On his first day, he walked through the front door holding a sink, to really make a case that everyone should sit back and let that sink in. He fired half the company, removed its executives, made it a private company, and went about shaping it in his mind's eye. This is where everything changed. The once praised eccentric genius billionaire was now being cast in a different light, and his haters became louder than ever. When Musk first said that he was going to go buy Twitter, it seemed like he was enacting a meme in real life. And then he went and made it happen. He said that it was an engineering product that had its problems, whereas his biographer said that he just did it because he wanted more drama in his life. There were definitely many problems for him to solve, and the drama has undoubtedly followed him very closely ever since. Since then, the media's portrayal of him has shifted. The quirky genius who was building the technologies to save the world and often had funny things to say was now an evil billionaire with a hidden agenda, who posed a threat to democracy and the modern world as we know it. The narrative now tends to focus on how he promotes hate speech and is aligned with the far right in a way that made Twitter a toxic place, and how his clashes with big advertisers are what makes him evil. The thing is, social media is generally just an echo chamber that reaffirms your worldviews. Algorithms as a whole are just designed to give you what you want, and you're rarely ever going to change your mind based on what you see. More radical views being expressed isn't necessarily a reflection of the algorithm changing or these being promoted more. It's a reflection of public sentiment, feeding on each other's anger and frustrations, and shifting as a whole. The algorithms are designed to feed you more of what you want because that will keep you on the platform for longer. And people react more to sensationalist claims and big statements, so they get more traction. And that is a whole flywheel that has been going on for over a decade. Equally, the media poses the narratives of him that it does because that's what gets attention. Evil billionaire who makes everyone hateful will get some people to click and back what they're saying. But it doesn't really pose the bigger questions at play here. Should these companies be publicly or privately owned? To what extent does free speech online inherently promote extreme views, and how does it impact polarization? Is it possible for a social media platform to not censor anything and still be a force for good? If not, then what is actually worthy of censorship and what actually constitutes fake news? Why is it in certain individuals' interests to keep people fighting each other over all kinds of things, to stop them looking around and seeing their future being molded before their very eyes without even questioning it? Rather than asking those types of questions, the narratives posed tend to just reaffirm the views of those that are against him. Whether they think he overstates his bad financial situation when he was young, since his dad always had money and he just wants to sound relatable as one big walking PR exercise, or he's seen as evil for busting unions and treating his employees poorly, when people make up their mind on someone, it's often hard to change that perception. More importantly, when it comes to Elon Musk specifically though, the real question is how much power should an individual actually have to impact current affairs and ultimately play a role in dictating the future of mankind.
You have one individual who controls the power grid, who controls the vehicle, who controls the AI, who controls the implant, who controls the social media platform, and who controls the satellites and the internet's going into space. It's the perfect setup for Lex Luthor.
Luke Belmar has a viral video explaining how Elon Musk owns so many moving parts that interconnect with each other in a way that not only gives him the power to exert control, but ultimately the potential to fundamentally direct the future of humanity. Elon has put himself in an unprecedented position, where a single individual has the amount of decision-making and potentially history-altering power in as many different fields as he currently has. He's the closest individual we've seen to being a state within a state, and he's a powerful and influential one at that. BlackRock and Vanguard as companies have assets under management that would make them the third and fourth highest GDPs in the world if they were individual countries, and their impact on the world is also immense. But Elon as an individual has even more decision-making power in key technologies. At that point, it's fair to ask not only if an individual should be able to wield this power, but also who this individual is. The same way that a superiority complex can be seen as the other side of the coin to an inferiority complex, the superhero complex that his biographer mentioned earlier is one worth looking at. Luke Belmar made the comparison of him to Superman's villain Lex Luthor, and that's one worth building on. Lex Luthor is the CEO of LexCorp, who's an egotistical, narcissistic man who has the end goal of controlling the world. Lex Luthor is ultimately set in a fictional world, and a large part of his story directly relates to Superman. But if you can look past the hyperbole and see the comparison at face value, you can see why he made it. You may be able to call Elon Musk egotistical and narcissistic, and you just have to go to the mainstream media to find plenty of examples of that. And as we've covered, he's built up the power and control over so many different industries that no human in history has ever done before him. To really make that comparison though, the last bit of the equation is probably the most important one: his intentions. Why did Musk decide to put himself in the position he's in? Was it to become the richest man on Earth? Was it because he saw problems, started tackling them one by one, and gradually built to this point? Does he believe that he's the only one capable of having the intellectual prowess and moral standards to solve these problems, so he brings it upon himself to do so? The thing is, one doesn't just find themselves in the position he has accidentally. You don't just wake up one day having a hand on the pulse of the future of mankind without deliberate action to get there. His superhero complex that we've mentioned ultimately underlies a lot of his actions. He clearly wants to be the person to save humanity or to solve its hardest problems. If he uses that drive in a way that ultimately benefits humanity, and his intentions are to move it in an objectively positive direction, then it will prove beneficial. The thing is, technologies are built on the shoulders of their predecessors. The V-2 rockets the Nazis used to bomb Britain eventually led to the Starship. The internet that started out as a development from a project in the US Defense Department eventually led to social media. And the chariot eventually led to the electric car. What his work and his innovations end up leading to, only time will tell. Personally, I believe that Elon Musk will go down as one of the most significant people not just in the 21st century, but in all of human history. What he's already done is revolutionary, and what he plans to do could go even beyond that. Socrates, Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, and many others have written their names into the history books, and their work outlived them by generations. Elon Musk will most likely also go into that category by the time he dies, and it might just take him being dead for a few years for people to recognize that, given how polarizing a figure he's become. Unfortunately for him though, he may just have put himself in a position where he's not the one who is ultimately in control of his own legacy. If the technology he developed at Tesla ends up being used for controlling and limiting the population in draconian ways, even if it's not him doing it, he played a huge role in making it possible. Once he's out of the picture at Neuralink, he won't be involved in what happens if we end up with enhanced humans that came as a result of implanting chips in people's heads, and all the consequences that would stem from that. But he'll have started the chain reaction. Whenever SpaceX achieves their goal of landing on Mars, what happens with humans on Mars and ultimately the relationship between the people of Earth and Mars will be part of his legacy. To say his impact is unprecedented isn't even big enough of a statement. Elon Musk is simultaneously in so many different fields with the potential to revolutionize humanity in so many different ways that his legacy could possibly be changing even centuries from now. Some people have a problem with the way that he portrays himself. They say that he's a great walking PR campaign, where he was able to string together an unfortunate sounding origin story even though he's always had his dad's significant financial backing, and that he uses his cult following to overpromise on deadlines through Twitter to inflate the price of stocks before proceeding to underdeliver. You can expand that argument by saying he goes on Joe Rogan and other popular podcasts for 3 hours to tell stories where he can connect with young people while tweeting everything they want to hear to convince you that he's a man driven not by greed or power, but by the betterment of humanity. There's a saying that goes, "Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely." It could be that with the amount of power he's amassed, which he's definitely aware of, he's just trying to play the role of God. It could also be that the guy is just wired differently, and the reason he's been able to put himself in this position in the first place is because of how he thinks, which has determined his actions and therefore his intentions. To really answer the question of intentions, the Gospel of Matthew gives us a good premise to go by. You will know them by their fruits. Whatever he goes on to do with the position he's put himself in will determine what his intentions were all along. Walter Isaacson said that his main goals were getting humanity to Mars, having sustainable energy on this planet, and making robots safe. The first two are inherently coming from a place of doing good. The third, though, might just be the hardest of the challenges he's taken on, and ultimately the one that ends up defining him. The ebbs and flows of time will tell us whether Elon Musk could be remembered as the superhero he set out to be, or whether he'll end up being cast in the villain category. It may be tempting to classify people as good or evil and just view them through that lens, but that is just too simplistic. People are objectively just people. Good people sometimes do bad things, and bad people sometimes do good things. He's a divisive figure who's undoubtedly done a lot of good for a lot of people, as well as someone who's done damage to others. He clearly lives by the mantra that you can't make the impact you want unless you're willing to be disruptive. And you can't be disruptive unless you're willing to break things and leave rubble in your wake. Thank you for sticking through to the end. I hope that was an insightful deep dive into the fascinating character that is Elon Musk and the unique place that he holds within society today. If you did enjoy it, don't forget to leave this video a like, leave a comment to let me know what you think, and if you're interested in the topics of people, the world, life lessons, and geopolitics, don't forget to subscribe to this channel to keep up to date with all the new content we have coming your way. We're still just getting started and there's a whole lot more to come. I'll see you next time.